We are going to get started now. I believe we do have translation, ASL interpretation available. The directions for that are on your screen to make sure that everyone can follow along. We'll begin with our roll call. Lynn Andrews.
Here.
Oliver Beasley.
I'm here.
Dr. Jamil Bey.
I'm here.
Joanna Deming. Knowledge Build Hudson. Jerome Jackson.
Here.
Council President Teresa Kale Smith. Mark Masterson.
Here.
James Myers. Marcus Reed. Dr. Paul Spradley.
Here.
Sonia Tillman.
Here.
Derek Tillman.
Here.
Dr. Diamante Walker.
Here.
Adrian Wanaha.
Present.
And Megan Winters. Okay, great. We will move on to review and approve our minutes from the month of February. Has everyone had the opportunity to review the said minutes? Any additions or corrections?
Motion to approve the February minutes.
Second.
Dr. Peck? Sorry, was that Paul with the second?
It was.
Okay, thank you. Just for March's minutes, want to make sure we get that right. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
nays? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain, Kelly, because I wasn't here.
And okay, minutes stand approved. We'll next move on to public comment. Shana, do you know who our public commenters are, or do we have any in order?
We do have two public commenters, Thomas Rogers.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Thomas, you can go first.
And if Thomas is not here, then Megan Confer Hammond.
Megan, you can begin.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Confer Hammond. I am the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Partnership of Greater Pittsburgh. To do a couple of fair housing updates for the city, so that you know, April is Fair Housing Month, and we'll be sending out information, particularly on an event regarding the fair housing protections for survivors of domestic violence. And we have city-specific protections, as well as efforts that are happening on a state level to make explicit protections possible. And so that will be along with other events. Also, I want to raise that it is, going into March, and, I would like to be involved directly and regularly with the Fair Housing Committee. I have reached out, but I haven't received, engagement back. And I have dedicated the time specifically to do a deep dive into the application of fair housing into the HOS programs. As we talked about in the past, is that, we need the time and effort in order to apply equity, across the program output and the assessment. And so I am ready and available with time dedicated to this specific task. And so I asked to engage with and speak with regularly the Fair Housing Committee on the actual work of applying this information in a way that is equitable for the affordable housing of our city. I'll also share is that as we are seeing the evictions increase as the ERAP program is ending and rent relief is going back to its pre-COVID state, is that we are continuing to get cases in the city regarding fair housing in which families with children are denied housing in the private market because they have children. There are 2 active complaints at the complaint level with investigation in the city right now. And so while the private market is not specifically to the HOF programs, is to be aware of, we're seeing families looking for housing, having not simply evictions, but non-renewals, and then the acts of discrimination that are precluding access to the next house. On that note, in a similar way, we're doing active investigations into the fair housing compliance of recovery homes. The operation of recovery homes, which are protected under the Fair Housing Act, where the status of being in recovery from a drug or alcohol addiction qualifies as a disability, but the unregulated and unoversight of the recovery homes and how that's impacting our residential areas in terms of the operations from the program operating as a housing provider, and discrimination that can occur due to the lack of knowledge about how to operate and the requirements. And then let me also close with making a formal statement that, we saw formally that ERAP is announced its ending. And so I implore the HOF to consider how the HSP can learn from ERAP and potentially consider the HSP taking over the city applications in the ERAP program, and how that HSP is what we have now with ERAP closing regarding rent relief and how to benefit the residents of Pittsburgh with the program. I thank you all. Enjoy your day, and I'll follow up and talk to you all later. Bye.
Thank you, Megan. Is our other public commenter prepared to speak at this time? Okay. If not, we will continue down our agenda.
Kelly,
Yes, I'm sorry.
just to ask a quick question to Megan's point, I know that we were attempting to convene. You had sent out some information to members to convene the Fair Housing Subcommittee. Have we landed on a date for that
No,
yet?
so we haven't. So thank you, Adrian. I had made a note to myself to make sure I address that in our administrative items, but this is an excellent time. There is a doodle, Megan, just for information, is we have not, unfortunately, we have not convened. We have not excluded you. I'm not sure which is, we have not been excluding you, but we have not actually been able to land on a date. There is currently a doodle out to HOF members, which was fairly expansive, trying to find a date for the month of March. And when we narrowed that down to 2 or 3 dates, I was going to reach out to you to check your availability and select a date. So unfortunately, you haven't actually missed anything, or fortunately, in that we are not excluding you, depending on how you look at it. But we are working forward to get cooking with gas, as my great aunt says, starting in the month of March. So thank you, Adrian, for bringing that.
You, Kelly.
So I believe our other public commenter is not present. So we'll move forward with a presentation by Matt Media of Neighborhood Allies, working on housing preservation.
Thanks, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your time and for having me today. I don't have any slides to present, so either sorry or you're welcome, depending on your opinion of PowerPoint. But want to just spend a few minutes talking about the preservation working group, and then happy to take any questions or really any comments around our work and where you all think we can be going. So the Preservation Working Group is a group of individuals who are in organizations that primarily work on affordable housing, sort of at the citywide or even regional level. It grew out of some work that UPMC had been funding locally to try to figure out how they can play a more productive space in affordable housing generally. And there was sort of a core group that consisted of folks from Neighborhood Allies, Action Housing, Bridgeway Capital, and the URA and UPMC. One of the things that we identified sort of in that process, and this goes back to 2019 and into 2020, was the need for a more concerted effort in our region around the preservation of affordable housing, the housing stock that we already have. That group has since grown to include, say, 20 to 25 sort of regular participants in the group. And the goal, quite simply, is to make our ecosystem for preservation better. It's really just sort of as simple as that. I think the value proposition of preservation is pretty obvious, but let me just say that one, while we're not talking about creating new units of affordable housing, we are talking about preserving existing housing. Ergo, we are keeping strain off of the existing affordable housing system by making sure that quality and affordable current units that are currently of quality and are affordable are kept. The other thing to keep in mind that I think is also pretty obvious is that preserving a unit of housing is cheaper than constructing a new unit of housing, right? So we are seeing, $250,000 and up per unit, and that's only getting worse based on sort of supply chain and construction market activity. For new construction versus preservation, we see units that are livable, might need a little bit of work, but are livable and can be purchased for anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 per unit. So from a financing perspective and a cash flow perspective, you're actually talking about projects that are oftentimes more viable or just maybe easier to pull together your capital stack. So I think, again, that kind of sort of the conceit of the group is relatively obvious, right? What are we working on specifically? So I would say we work in two areas. The first is what I'll call the acute or emergency affordable housing crisis. This is where a LIHTC project or some other regulated housing stock, goes on the market or is otherwise sort of lost. Think of the Penn Plaza crisis, or what happened in Homewood and a couple other in Wilkinsburg, the Homewood Bethesda housing a few years ago. How can we identify those properties before they become a problem, not after, in some cases, it's too late? How can we make sure that tenants are protected, that responsible buyers and developers can sort of be introduced to the system? So again, working on that sort of at a holistic kind of ecosystem level. A couple specific things in that space that we're working on. One is we're in the very early stages of thinking about some recommendations around right of first refusal, which, if you're not familiar, would give a either public buyer or community-based buyer the opportunity to purchase a regulated piece of affordable housing before it could sort of go on the market. This is something that is used in a couple other cities around the country, but is I think we're learning that it's not always playing out as intended, and so we're trying to figure out sort of what makes those that kind of a system work and where might it not work. So we're in the early stages of that, and that would be a sort of a local intervention. The other thing that we're doing is talking regularly with Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, who is increasingly interested in the concept of preservation. One of the things that we are calling for is in the LIHTC application is a disclosure of, if you are a developer who has essentially flipped a property or otherwise let the affordability restrictions on a property expire, that you would have to disclose that. I think we would go as far to say that you should probably be that you should be prohibited from getting new tax credits in the future. But the way that's sort of playing out is that it would be a point deduction So that's something that we're advocating for. And I think PHFA is receptive to that. The other thing is obviously funding, dedicated funding for preservation that would come from the state. The state does not want to see low-income housing tax credit, particularly those units lost to market. They view that as sort of a net negative on the year, right, when they're thinking about how they've allocated low-income housing tax credits. But there's always going to be some financing gap on those transactions. So we're also calling for some dedicated funding there. So that's one area, sort of like the big, light tech type deal that needs some quick intervention. The other thing is the more sort of chronic problem that we're facing in our region, which is the loss of the naturally occurring affordable housing. So again, we are working to identify those properties and then identify credible buyers for them. Unfortunately, in the situation here is that we are competing with the open market, and we are often competing with cash buyers who, don't particularly care about whether or not the transaction will pencil out for affordable rents because they are looking to increase the rent with minimal changes, minimal capital improvements to the property. You can actually actively see how this plays out when properties hit the market. The listing agents will actively say, hey, this is a unit that is under rent for the neighborhood and with minimal improvements, could be a great cash flowing property. So that's how they're actively being marketed. That means that really the thing that we need is a sort of community of folks who care about preservation is faster capital and easier capital access. So in that space, we're really working hard on how can we get almost a line of credit type facility that a developer could access so that they can make a competitive offer when a property hits the market. The other thing I will say about that work is that unfortunately, it is primarily occurring outside of the city of Pittsburgh, so within Allegheny County, but outside of the city limits. I am afraid that we have lost many of those naturally occurring properties that could be purchased for relatively cheap. I think in most neighborhoods in the city, that ship has already sailed, unfortunately. But I don't think that there are no opportunities left. I just think that it's an important point that we really need to act in this space now. The last thing I'll say is sort of the biggest challenge that we face as a group and that we see in the ecosystem is actually not the capital, it's not the legislation, it's not the data, which is something we're also always looking at. It is capacity. It is having buyers and developers who are focused on preservation, who know how to purchase a property, keep tenants in it, make improvements while sort of managing that transition without losing both the affordability and losing the quality of life for the tenants who already live there, and improving the quality of life in some cases. We're just short on both nonprofit and for-profit buyers that have experience in that space and have the ability to attract financing for that space. So I think that's the biggest challenge, and something as you all are in your communities or in your various workspaces that I would ask and really encourage you to be thinking about and keeping an eye open for those sort of credible buyers. So I know I spit out a lot there. I'm going to stop and see if there are questions or comments.
Matt, Sonia, do you have anything that summarizes this? I thought it was a lot of good information, but it might be helpful to have something that you could refer to.
Yes, I do. We have a one-pager for the group, and I'll share that with Becca, and if she can circulate, or somebody else.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia.
I'm on the preservation working group, so I don't know if this is yet another conflict of interest for me, but I do want to say that this group is doing a lot of really thoughtful and needed work, and it's very relevant to the Housing Opportunity Fund, because we talk a lot about new developments, and I know we talked about this at our last meeting, but we also really have to focus on the existing stock of affordable housing in the region. So thanks, Matt, for coming, and I'm really glad you came to present to all of us.
Thanks, Lena.
So Matt, this is Derek. Is the strategy to, I guess, put together a fund to start to acquire, units that fall into this space, or is it, really just to get landlords and developers interested in, kind of joining this this strategy?
So it's definitely both, Derek. It's a good question. We probably spend more time and sort of more energy on the funding side. I think just naturally, because we all know that there's a need there. We also think that American Rescue Plan funding at the county, although unfortunately it appears the county might have spent all their funding already. And at the city, which did allocate money specifically for preservation, can be used for this. So in both of those cases, so in the case of the city, we're happy to see that. We'd love to see that. I think it was $5 million increased, but $5 million is a great start. We'd love to see sort of a matching program at the county, and we're talking to them. I do think that the state will be, it will take longer, but have more impact, or I guess I should say it'll just be a larger fund there, hopefully. Again, they have a lot of American Rescue Plan dollars that they could potentially devote to this. I think even without that, PHFA recognizes the need for this, and so is sort of thinking creatively about how they can. So right now, in a low-income housing tax credit application, preservation is a focus area. So it's not as that they don't care about it, but you're still competing against all of the new construction projects, supportive housing, senior housing, all that stuff. So having something that's really much more focused on preservation coming out of the state, I think is sort of mid-range an attainable goal for us.
And from a timing perspective, I guess on the first tier, do you all have a sense? I understand state will take longer, but I guess local. Do you have a sense from a timing perspective?
It's conjecture on my part, but I do think that there will be some dedicated funding probably made available sometime this year. We're also talking sort of to private folks, right? The foundation community is interested in this, and so we're working them. As I said, this grew out of some UPMC efforts, so we're hopeful that they might invest. So I'm hopeful that we could see something sort of formalized and unveiled this year.
All right, if there are no other questions, we do have a couple of presentations and voting items by URA staff on developments.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Victoria Jackson. I'm a lending analyst with the Residential Lending and Investments Unit, and I am presenting a request from City of Bridges Community Land Trust for a project on Chatsworth Avenue. City of Bridges Community Land Trust requests construction grant financing in the amount of $620,000 to finance development costs for four for-sale single-family homes on Chatsworth Avenue in Hazelwood. Each home will be a 3-bedroom and 1.5 bathroom modular built unit sold to buyers between 50 and 80% AMI. These units have a sales price between $120,000 and $135,000. The proposed grant will be sourced with HOF for-sale development program funds from 2019 and 2020. Per FSDP guidelines, each unit will have a 99-year affordability restriction. This grant request does exceed the $100,000 per unit maximum for new construction as outlined in the guidelines. As such, we are requesting a waiver of the guidelines with the understanding that if American Rescue Plan Act funds become available between the time of commitment and closing, those funds may wholly or partially replace the FSDP funds. A little bit about the project. In 2020, the community builders and City of Bridges were selected in response to the URA's request for proposal to complete a redevelopment project reflective of the Greater Hazelwood Neighborhood Plan for the publicly owned sites along the 2nd Avenue corridor in Hazelwood. City of Bridges will construct 12 permanently affordable for-sale units on these sites. The 4 units discussed today represent the first phase of that residential development. In addition to being permanently affordable units, these homes will also deliver on environmental health as well as energy efficiency as part of the Living Building Challenge affordable housing pilot projects from the International Living Future Institute. To this end, City of Bridges has engaged EcoCraft Homes as the builder and has a commitment from Solar United Neighbors for the cost of solar installations on these 4 units. City of Bridges is currently undergoing the disposition process to purchase 5 lots from the URA to develop these units. The vote for the final authorization will occur at the March URA board meeting. And City of Bridges plans to begin construction in April 2022 and complete construction in November of the same year. Regarding other financing sources, City of Bridges has commitments and awards from the Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Program, the Hines Endowment, FAIR, Solar United Neighbors, and the Hillman Foundation. So once again, we are requesting approval for a waiver of the FSDP guidelines and a grant in the amount of $620,000 for City of Bridges Community Land Trust to finance development activities for 4 for-sale units on Chatsworth Avenue. I do want to note that Ed Nusser and Julie Collins of City of Bridges are also here today to answer any questions you may have about the project. With that, I will open the floor to questions.
I think just the one question I would raise is related to the enhanced funding limit. We have had this conversation in the past about going over the funding limit that was established. And there's obviously additional funding that's being looked at and potential in this project, but it's, again, one of those things that I think we just need to take seriously about when and why we're making variations in those limits.
Hi, all. I'm Ed with City of Bridges. I'd be happy to speak to that, Adrienne, about just the total cost of the project. And so first and foremost, the cost of the project we're seeing is just influenced by the reality of construction costs right now.
Sure.
We're still dealing with supply chain issues, and we expect to be dealing with those for the next 18 to 24 months. But also, too, I think that these are, as Victoria mentioned, these are going to be the most energy efficient, affordable homes anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania if we're able to accomplish the living building goals. So they're going to be fully electric homes, no natural gas connections, solar panels on the roof that will, in combination with appliance upgrades and wall assembly and insulation upgrades, deliver about a 70 to 80% energy use reduction from a typical baseline house in the region. So no gas bill, only an electric bill, and solar offsets about 70% of that electric bill. So these are going to be really affordable homes, not just to buy, but also to live in for folks, which you think is really important. And then also to fully recognizing that this is a significant request on the dollar amount. But in the land trust model, we're guaranteeing that that dollar amount is going to be stretched out for generations. The national average is that CLT homeowners stay in their home for 7 to 8 years. which is a little bit longer actually than how long market rate homeowners stay in their homes. And so if that national average holds, every one of these homes that we build will serve 12 to 15 homeowners. So really we're talking about creating access and opportunity for as many as 48 to 60 low-income homeowners to be able to own their home through this project. So while it is a big upfront investment, when you look at it over time and the number of households that we can serve, this could really be, as many as 60 affordable homes for families over the next 99 years.
Thank you, Ed. I think you just actually put together a framework. So if we are making decisions that are outside our typical parameters, and I think you hit on 3 key ones, one that isn't going to go away anytime soon, which is, adjusting our thinking related to escalating costs of product as one of those pieces. A second one being things like, are we taking into account enhanced features related to energy and energy costs? Do the projects have a greening component, a sustainability component that we're focused on as HOF, and that real length of affordability? So again, I'm not indicating in any kind of way, I don't think that we can't adjust, but I think, Ed, you literally set up a really good framework for us when we're having those conversations. What are those high points that we really want to be focused on in our decision-making related to, we want to adjust the awards that we're giving, and we're doing that because these are priorities that were set by the HOF. We feel the value there, and that informs our decision.
Well, I guess I'd just, look at this as, I think our guidelines need to be revisited right now. We need to look at this. I know that the funding hasn't increased at all, but I just don't think that the guidelines are going to hold up with what the cost of actually doing this stuff is. It's not getting less expensive. It's very difficult to find contractors. There are some temporary pricing increases on different building materials, but I think labor cost is going to be going up, and it should. I think that is a good thing for the economy, but we need to be maybe re-looking at what the program guidelines actually are.
Agreed.
Well, I guess I'll move for approval if there's no other discussion, or if the people wanted to, at least we'll get a motion on the floor.
I'm going to recuse. I have to recuse myself. This is from voting. This is Derek.
Yeah, I have to recuse myself too.
Same, this is Sonia.
So I would second that motion, but to Mark's point, and to my comments, I do think we need to revisit so that we do have a framework and a justification as to why we're making decisions that are outside the norm of our protocol, and also, sharpening the focus of our protocol to make sure it's responsive to the projects that come in front of us.
I do want to add one thing. When we do that, I think it's important that we understand that we're one piece of a larger puzzle. So we shouldn't just look at HOF funding in a vacuum. We have to look at all of the different funding sources, because sometimes we might need to put more HOF funds into a project because other funding sources don't work. And when we look at our funding alone, I think we might miss elements of this that are really important.
I think it's going to be more of a formula than a hash mark guidelines test where, a little algebraic with all of the different variables that come up to what it is that we're going to need to put in. So I think that as we revisit our guidelines, it's going to resemble the type of math problem that I was not a fan of growing up, more than kind of like if this then that. But I definitely agree with all points made that I think we're going to have to move in that direction. Did we have a second on Mark's motion, or did we pause? Okay, or did we pause and discuss? Okay, so we do have a motion on the table.
I seconded the motion. Okay. Read it in the comments.
Okay. We have a pin and a separate conversation around the guidelines generally, and then a motion on the floor to approve this expenditure, I believe, Mark, that was seconded by Adrian. We have Lena, Sonia, and Derek recusing themselves from this vote.
Before we vote, can you, what's the total ask?
Thank you. Can we get that recommendation slide up, please? If we have one. Thank you. So, Mark, if you would, if this is the motion that you would like to make, if you could phrase, that would be excellent.
You're muted, Mark.
I'll figure this out one of these days. Okay, I make a motion that that we enter into an agreement, grant agreement with City of Bridges Community Land Trust in the amount of $620,000, and that also to recommend approval to authorize a waiver of for sale development program guidelines to exceed the per unit grant amount of $100,000.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jerome. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
All right, any opposed? And we have our 3 abstentions previously noted. All right, congratulations.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate the investment in our work.
Thank you. Kelly, will we put this discussion of, revisiting the guidelines on the agenda for next month?
It makes sense to have a working session.
Yes.
I feel like that might take some time that couldn't be contained by our regular meeting.
Thoughts on a working session versus having it as an administrative item? So our administrative item section normally is brief, but we may get in the weeds with this a little bit. Thoughts from the group?
Well, my schedule is just so packed that it's hard for me to commit to finding another time in the next month. So I would prefer it happens during the meeting, but I understand why it might get in the weeds and require another session, but I would like to participate in that.
So perhaps we can frame it next month in a discussion under administrative items and kind of get some bullets to be dived into, perhaps by another working group in the intervening month if necessary.
Right, and it would be, and I'm being selfish and personal. It would be helpful for me if we even put that potential date on the calendar for the following month. Let's work on that date already. I have trouble clearing anything in the 30-day. My months are really crazy, but that's just one person.
Okay, so that would be a doodle for post-April meeting. So for between April and May for a date to calendar. I just want to make sure I'm getting.
Yes, that would work.
Okay. All right, I think we can do that. All right. Any thoughts on how to get this done before we move on to prestigious hills?
I actually think it would be helpful to talk with, at least for sale development. Let's talk with folks that are doing the work right now. We've approved a couple of these deals now. If they're willing to talk with us about what they're seeing with costs and different funding sources, so that everybody on the committee has a good familiarity with how these deals get put together. I would say similar for the rental gap program, to have a couple of folks come in and be ready to talk about some of what the challenges are. Where do they get the money? How do they put the deals together?
Would it be possible, or would anybody be interested in having that be how we've added this community presentation from developers and folks working in the field at the beginning of the agenda, to have perhaps, if we could line somebody up for April and somebody else for May, so that can be part of the entire conversation that we're having, so it's on point to what we're working on?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Also, not to put anybody on the spot, but we do have folks on our lovely advisory board who are operating those spaces and view things as we do, because you are us. So if you are interested in being one of those presenters, feel free to reach out to I'm volunteering Shayna. I believe that would be what she would be coordinating. Shayna, is correct? Is that you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. To see about getting on the agenda in either place to help inform our discussion.
I think we might have a really good data set just looking at the 10 most recent RGP deals we've approved, like the per unit cost, all of the gap sources. I mean, I'm happy to walk through an action housing deal, but we have a really good data set to show like how much public money is needed to fill the gaps in these projects, because a few of them have exceeded the limits. So I know the URA has a huge amount going on, but we have those packets. So maybe we could pull it together and just look at that and say like, oh, do our guidelines make sense, or do we need to adjust them? And it's the same thing for sale developers too.
Just to quickly chime in, City of Bridges would be happy to help on any of the for sale stuff. We've got a number of deals lined up, this one and a few others you'll be seeing in the near future. So happy to share any information that we have that could be helpful.
Great. We will pull those together for the next 2 months and work on, if you're interested in being in that additional working group, again, reach out so we can make sure that we can get that scheduled as well. So moving on, the next item on the agenda is Prestigious Hills.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. My name is Brett Morgan, and today I'm presenting a rental gap program loan for the Prestigious Hills redevelopment in East Hills. The development was built originally in 1969 and was part of a larger, at the time, 404 unit phase development. East Hills Limited Partnership, which is an affiliated entity of Telesis Corporation, acquired the property back in 2004 and completed a 9% low-income housing tax credit rehab of some of those units. The project at that time had been known as Second East Hills Phase 1, but now 18 years later, many of those units now require additional reinvestment and renovations to remain an affordable housing asset. So for the purposes of this project being presented today, this will be a 4% LIHTC rehab, including 117 units across 29 separate buildings. Those 117 units are made up of 87 3-bedrooms and 34 bedroom units, and they will all remain affordable as 24 at or below 30% AMI and 93 units are at or below 50%. And if approved, a declaration would be recorded by the URA at closing to ensure that these units do remain affordable for a period of 40 years. And additionally, all 117 units are supported by a HUD Housing Assistance Program Section 8 contract. So in addition to Telesis serving as the project developer, Mista Construction's the general contractor, LGA Partners is the architect, and Neighborhood Associates Corporation is the nonprofit applicant. NAC is a DC-based nonprofit and a founding member of Neighborhood Partners LLC. They have served as the property manager at the site since 2003 and since the 9% LIHTC redevelopment. So to speak a bit about the community engagement process at the site, the borrower has an active partnership between Telesis, NAC, the East Hills Social Services Center, and several other key community stakeholders. That includes the Beverly Jewel Wall Lovelace Children's Program, the Banks Children's Learning Center, the Urban League Youth Places, and the Greater Pittsburgh Area Mad Dads, which provide and tailor services to residents of the site. And ongoing community engagement is also occurring through conversations with the East Hills Consensus Group, as well as efforts in the neighborhood by Rising Tide to assist distressed homeowners. At this site in particular, Neighborhood Partners LLC, with the help of those community stakeholders, have provided a wide array of programs dedicated to promoting computer access, advancing literacy, providing employment opportunities, and there are other programs as well, educational programs and childcare programs that have been made available to younger residents at the site. At any rate, regarding the RGP loan, repayment would occur annually as a percentage of net project cash flow, though the outstanding balance would be due upon maturity of the loan after the 40-year loan term plus the construction period. And lastly, the proposed RGP loan would be sourced with HOF 2021 30% set-aside funds, as this was a respondent to the Housing Opportunity Fund's currently open rental gap program request for proposals. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Max Glickman, a representative from Telesis Corporation, who we've been working with as we have reviewed this application and advanced it to you all today. We can now answer any questions that you may have, but we do at this time request approval of the $1.25 million RGP loan. Thank you.
Are they unavailable or are we having technical?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I believe Max is on the.
I'm on here. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. Thank you for having us. Not sure if anyone has any questions.
Okay. Sorry, he introduced you and I didn't see you pop up, so I was wondering if you were here. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
That's my fault. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's it also probably didn't pivot because he didn't. That's fine. It's one of those Zoom things where if we were all physically together, we would know he was here and start asking questions. Anybody have any questions for Max about this development?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Can you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Max, I'm sorry if I missed this, but are the other funding sources all secured?
Yes, they are secured. It's mostly tax credit equity. There's going to be a permanent loan and some PHFA funded.
Great.
And maybe I missed it, but Neighborhood Associates Corporation, the applicant, how are they in the project? Who are they?
They are a nonprofit that provides services, resident services to all Telesis communities nationwide. And they are 51%, I believe, owner of the management agent, Neighborhood Partners LLC. So they have a very direct kind of responsibility for management of the property and resident services provisions.
And then who names who names the board of directors? Like who controls the nonprofit?
The board itself, I think, has a governance committee that names additional board members.
Self-selected. Is there any local representation on that board from this project, or any tenant input into anything?
We do have a resident council at Prestigious Hills at Second East Hills now that Neighborhood Partners and Telesis communicate with on a regular basis. But I don't know if there's a board member representative. I don't think there is.
Any other questions for Max? All right, if not, do we have a recommendation on the table?
May I make a motion to approve?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. All those in, do we need to word it more specifically, or or can we put in do we need the recommendation to be the full paragraph?
I think it does need to be.
Okay, that's what I
need to
thought.
approve
If
the
we can
amount.
get that on, thank you, if we can get that on the floor. Thank you. If anybody would like to rephrase their motion.
Can I make a motion to approve the loan agreement for 1.25 million for the renovation of Prestigious Hills, formerly known as Second East Hills?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
I have to recuse myself.
Okay, any opposed? Okay.
I abstain.
And do we have, Derek, you too? Is this the same 3 abstentions?
I abstain as well.
And that's Jerome. Okay. All right, the motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. And now we have the Stanton Highlands apartment presentation.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Nicholas Person. I am a lending analyst in the residential lending department of the URA. And today I'll be presenting on phase 2 of the Stanton Highland Apartments rehabilitation project in the East Liberty neighborhood of Pittsburgh. The main action being presented to the board today is the authorization to enter into a rental gap loan agreement with the borrower AHI Stanton Highland Apartments Incorporated in the amount of $690,000. Next slide. So prior to 2020, the Stanton Highland Apartments was owned by the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary and was originally purposed as market rate graduate housing for students. However, due to changing needs within the wider community, as well as the changing needs of the seminary themselves, they were incentivized to sell the apartments to a nonprofit developer like Action Housing under the condition that they be transformed into affordable housing. Next slide. Now, as you will see in the bottom right-hand image of the slide, the Stanton Highland Apartments is composed of 3 individual buildings, 2 of which highlighted in gray are known as the Anderson and Macmillan buildings, which during phase 1 exclusively received core and shell renovations in 2020. For phase 2 of this project, Action Housing is focusing solely on renovations to what is known as the Hawthorne building. The original 23 units of this building are to all receive renovations and are to all be transformed into affordable housing, being marketed towards tenants with incomes at or below 50% AMI. In order to secure long-term affordability, Action Housing has also gone into a gap financing loan agreement with the Allison Ross Management and Development Corporation under the condition that all 23 units be eligible for HCP project-based vouchers. In addition to also making these units more inclusive to a wider range of people, Action Housing is collaborating with GBBN architects to redesign 10 of these 23 units to comply with uniform federal accessibility standards. In other words, making them more accessible to those with physical and/or mental disabilities. Action Housing is also coordinated with the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh to determine appropriate rent levels, which can be seen below. It's also worth mentioning that in addition to the gap financing loan from Allies Ross, the other main additional sources of funding for this project include a loan from the Tri-State Capital Bank, a loan from the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary themselves, as well as a $250,000 grant from the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency's Fair Fund. Now, with all that said, in order to cover the entire $4.85 million cost of this project, Action Housing is asking for additional soft financing from the URA, more specifically in the form of a $690,000 RGP loan, which they're eligible for based on the number of affordable units within this building. The repayment for this loan will be cash flow, And in order to also secure long-term affordability for a 40-year period, there will be a record of a deed restriction. Next slide. Now transitioning over into renovations, as you can see in these two images here, showing the proposed changes for the interior courtyard of the Hawthorne building. The main external renovations include courtyard landscaping with additional green spaces, as well as a redesign of the pedestrian pathways. In addition to this as well, as you will see highlighted in red, there will be the construction or extension of an entirely new community room with a shared and communal kitchen for the tenants. Lastly, as well as in order to maintain ADA compliance, GBN Architects is also incorporating an ADA compliant ramp for concerned tenants. Next slide. And then lastly, on to internal renovations. As mentioned earlier, all 23 units are received renovations in some form. This includes, but is not limited to, things like new bathroom tiling and fixtures, new kitchen appliances, as well as new flooring and lighting. That said, as well, for the 10 specific ADA compliant units, additional fixtures will also be added to them as well, which is highlighted here in the left-hand image, showing handlebars being incorporated on top of the toilets, as well as the showers. On a similar note as well, GBN Architects is also planning to design an entirely new elevator tower in the Hawthorne building in order to make the ADA units accessible to those with physical disabilities. Other things to mention as well include a new boiler, new air separator, as well as new storage tanks for the whole building. Next slide. And that is everything. Thank you very much for letting me present. I will be opening the floor to questions and comments, and also introducing Linda Metropoulos from Action Housing to also help answer any of these questions.
I just have a quick question about the community kitchen and community room. Since these are, full individual units, I mean, that's a great amenity. I'm just curious as to what spurred that piece of the project.
I can speak to that. There is no community space in this whole complex of 54 units. And given that we have a particular focus on serving people with disabilities who often can be very isolated, we felt it was really important to have a community room where people from the building could gather. And we thought it was a really important aspect of the programming of this building.
Thank you.
I would like to just mention one thing, and it references earlier conversation about naturally occurring affordable housing. We love this project. It has not been an easy project. It was built 70 years ago, so there were definitely a lot of upgrades that we needed to bring to the project. One of the challenges, and I'm particularly glad that there will be sort of restrictive covenants on this project, is that the property was immediately reassessed by the county for tax purposes, and we have a tax bill of $55,000 for the 54 units in this complex. It's not a very sustainable amount of money unless you have restrictive covenants that you've agreed to, that PHFA, or in this case, the URA, will require us to adhere to. The county doesn't care about affordable housing, that you're committing to it unless there is a regulation that is forcing you to commit to it. So in engagement around this whole issue of naturally occurring affordable housing, I think there might need to be some activity to look at how real estate taxes can be addressed in that process. It is a big hit when your rents are so low and your incomes are low, to have to pay what the county views as market rate units, even though you are committing to affordability. So I just want to add that it's a challenge for operations when you're serving very low income people and have moderate rents.
I'll make a motion to approve a rental gap program loan with AHI Stanton Highlands Apartments Inc. in the amount of $690,000.
I'll second that motion.
I abstain from this one. Definitely.
All right, so we have the same recusals. We have, I've been notified by Derek that he's not able to unmute himself. He had a comment or question that he would like to make that may be pertinent before we vote on this. So I just want to call the attention that I don't know if we can unmute Derek. Derek, are you able to speak now? I'm not sure if you still need to speak.
Or can you text?
There's no chat allowed.
Yeah, we don't have a chat feature. Okay. So Derek, if you can text me if it's a comment that if it's something that we should know. Oh, here we go. Nope, it still says that got an error that the host is not allowing participants to unmute themselves is what Derek's getting when he's attempting to unmute.
Who's running the tech for this meeting? Can they actually say whether they're trying to do something to fix this, or are we just sitting? And also, Kelly, I need to, I don't know if we've got other votes, but I have a conflict this morning.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to jump off soon.
Let me review 1 second. I've got, okay. Apparently it is meaningful, but it's not, does not change the nature of our vote. So we do have a motion on the floor. Apologies for the delay. That has been properly made and seconded. We have our 3 recusals, so we can put that on record before we get to the abstentions. That would be Sonia, Lena, and Derek, who cannot speak, but will hopefully be able to get his comment at some later date. All those in favor of the motion to approve, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? And we have our abstentions. Are there any additional abstentions to note? Okay. Next, we have an update on our small landlord program guidelines.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Bailey Knapp. I am the new program coordinator. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Is there anything else that requires a vote today?
I am reviewing the agenda, and I believe that is the end of our voting items. Although, of course, we hope that everybody who is able to stay does so, because we do have some important updates, but they are not voting items.
I apologize. I just wasn't able to move this around today to accommodate. Have to leave.
All right. So I'll say hi, everyone. My name is Bailey Knapp. I'm the new program coordinator for the Housing Assistance Program and also the Small Landlord Fund, which we'll be talking about today. Wanted to give you guys a quick overview of the program and also talk about some of the URA board approved amendments to the guidelines. So pretty much the point of this program is to provide financing to landlords to make some of those interior, exterior renovations to their rental units. And the goal there is to preserve and grow affordable housing within the city of Pittsburgh, and also address some of the safety, health concerns that some of these properties have. So to address some of these boxes here, we've been growing numbers of inquiries. I probably get like one a week now for people who are interested in the program, and currently our application is closed. We've had 11 applications during the application cycle and 8 of them approved. Currently, all of them are in the mid to later parts of the project. So all of them are closed on documents, and some just need like final invoicing and construction. Next slide, please. So these are some of the eligibility guidelines here, requirements. The big one, and what kind of makes this program like what the program is that we do require these landlords who are going through getting these loans with us that they agree to rent out the completed units to housing choice voucher holders and comply with those contract requirements. If they decide not to do that, they still have to rent out to individuals who are at or below 80% average median income. One exception to that rule is if the landlord has a property that are in the housing authority's alternative payment standards, they have to agree to renting out to the housing choice holders. And those alternative payment standards, what it is, it's zip codes that are in areas that have lesser concentration of poverty. So that could be like Squirrel Hill, Strip District, Shady Side, places like that. Other requirements, borrower has to have 20% equity in the project, no outstanding city taxes, must have homeowner insurance policies, and then other things. So next slide, please. And these are some of the amendments that we've made to the guidelines recently. It has gone up from, it is now at $20,000 per unit, and it's up to $100,000 project maximum, which is $40,000 from what it originally was. We simplified the loan terms a little more, and it's based off money or just how much the loan's being approved for. So if it's 1 to 50,000, we're holding the loan terms up to 10 years. And if it's 50,000 to 100,000, it's going to go up to 15 years. And even if you pay off the loan before the loan term is up, you're still required to rent out those units to the housing choice vouchers. The deed restriction is the same, and then the interest rate we're holding at 3%. So those were amendments by the URA that we've made and approved to the URA board. Any questions?
How many units would you say those 11 applications that have been approved are funding?
Mm-hmm. So we've had the 11 applications. 8 of them were approved, at least the ones that I've been working on, since I've been working on, I think, 3 or 4 landlords. 2 of them have had 3 to 4 units, and 1 of them has had 1. So in total, we're probably looking at between like 10 to 20 units.
Any other questions or comments? Happy to see this moving forward. I know this helps to fill a gap that we have in our affordable housing landscape.
All right, thank you, everyone.
All right, so since this is not a voting item, we're moving on to the next. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. I'm Derek Kendall Morris, the Manager of Consumer Lending at the URA. I just wanted to provide an update on the Homeowner Assistance Fund to the board. This was brought before you all in November of last year, and a $50,000 allocation out of the demo fund was approved at that time to support Action Housing's efforts to launch a pilot for this program to assist homeowners who are experiencing difficulty paying mortgage payments and other financial issues, related to the pandemic and recent financial struggles. So providing an update that program is now up and running as of February 1st. But there were some changes that occurred, in the lead up to program launch that we wanted to make sure everyone was aware of. When this was presented to you all last year, there were only certain neighborhoods that the Action Housing was targeting, and they have added a few neighborhoods to their outreach targets, and that would be the Hill District and Uptown were added to the list, I believe. But this program actually will now serve all city neighborhoods. They are targeting their outreach in certain communities, but anyone who owns a home within the city of Pittsburgh can apply. Now, when we spoke to you all in November, the action that this board approved was contingent on funding that they had also applied for through PHFA. And PHFA did fund Action Housing's proposal, but only the outreach strategy that they had set forth. So it was slightly different than what they had proposed last year, but PHFA did end up supporting this effort. But that does not change, how Action Housing plans to utilize the Housing Opportunity Fund dollars that were approved last year. Like I said, it is up and running as of the 1st of February. And then there are certain community organizations that they're partnering with: the Kingsley Association, the Wellness Collective, the Hill District Consensus Group, and the Housing Stabilization Center downtown that Action Housing is running. These are all centers where people can physically go and apply if they're interested in receiving assistance through this program. I do want to introduce, I know we have Dan Sullivan here this morning from Action Housing, who can also probably correct any mistakes that I just made and answer any questions that anyone has about this particular program.
Yeah, hi
So thank
everybody. Yeah, thanks for taking the time for us today. Derek, I don't see any mistakes. Great job, thank you. I'm going to have you speak on behalf of this program moving forward at all times.
Thank you.
We haven't the real additions are going to be the Hill District Consensus Group that we brought in, so they'll be really focusing outreach in the Hill District and Uptown. I just want to let the group know that we have also put together almost $800,000 worth of grant money from RK Mellon, UPMC, and the Pittsburgh Foundation to keep those drop-in centers running. So those rents will get paid, and we'll be able to buy supplies and staff and everything like that. So also, I think the last time we spoke, the funding request from ACED was still pending. We are wrapping up a final contract with ACED through their housing trust fund for the amount of, I believe it's $200,000. So those are the additions. So, but I open the floor to any questions anybody has.
I have a question. Wondering why no neighborhoods outside of the East End are targeted for the outreach.
We ran a lot of data with CMU's Create Lab. And what we were trying to do was focus in on Black brown homeowners who had delinquent property taxes, who traditionally are missed when, like we did this program during the recession, ELP, and there was just this huge gap of applications. Like no one in these neighborhoods were applying. It's also the group that we had for ERAP who were already established. So we didn't have to recreate the wheel here. We had the infrastructure. So based on the community partners that we had that we trusted, like OBB, like Civically, and the data that we pulled from CMU's Create Lab, these were the targeted neighborhoods. That was originally the plan with PHFA, was to do it a bit small. It has certainly grown. And the funds that we have, if anything from the URA, that's citywide. County is countywide funds. The outreach was just targeted for those communities because, again, historically, they weren't submitting applications to programs like these.
Can we talk to you about expanding that targeted area?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we would definitely love to have that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? We previously voted on this authorization, so I don't believe this is a voting item.
That is correct, Kelly. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dan.
All right. Up next is our advisory board administrative items. You previously discussed the Fair Housing Committee, which has a doodle if you're on that committee or interested in joining that committee. It's been a little while. Please fill out that doodle. I can resend it so that it's top of your inbox. I know how these things get buried, so that we can get that scheduled as soon as possible and get Megan Conferham and looped in on that as well. The RFP review committee, I believe, has all the recommendations in that they're going to have, in addition to this, maybe some of the same folks who are going to be moving forward with what we were previously discussing in terms of changing our guidelines. So that might morph from one task force into another. I don't know if their communications and community outreach committee has met in the past month. Okay, I hadn't heard anything, but I just wanted to pause in case that were the case.
Yes, the
and-
RFP review committee has not met, but Mark and I are meeting this month to get an agenda pulled together to reconvene.
Wonderful.
The communications committee met in late January, but I ended up having to go out of town, so I was not there, and unfortunately can't give an update. But I think Knowledge and Mark are two of the other members, and neither are here anymore. So apologies for that.
Okay, so we'll stay tuned. Up next, I believe, Shane, are you going to discuss the nominations committee, or is that me?
Yeah, we just wanted to acknowledge that the chair and vice chair positions for this advisory board are year-long terms with a 2-year term max. And it might be, we recommend that this advisory board discuss how they want to advance conversations around those positions. It might be a good time for the nomination committee to reconvene and discuss what the approach is, if there are people interested in stepping in, or if people want to step down. It's about time to have that conversation. Maybe I would recommend to acknowledge who was on the nomination committee from last year, and if they would like to reconvene, or if new members would like to join to activate that conversation in the next month.
Shana, just a quick question. Obviously, we have a new administration, and how does that impact our thinking about membership? Have there already been discussions that you know of?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. We have informed the new administration of the vacant positions on the committee and or positions, I'm sorry, that are expiring. In addition to, if we've been made aware that someone would like to step down. So we are waiting on the administration to wrap their head around that concept and make some decisions. So it might be a good idea to wait until those decisions are made. That's a great, that's a point to consider as well. So we're expecting David Geiger, if you're still on, I'm not sure if you have an update, but ideally in the next couple of months, we would hear from the new administration.
Hey, Shana, I'm here, but I did miss the underlying question. If somebody could repeat. So
yeah, we're just talking about the advisory committee membership and the interaction between the new administration and if there's any status updates on their appointments to those positions that have expired or will be expiring.
No, I haven't heard anything from the administration on it one way or the other. They have been provided the information about sort of membership of this advisory committee and what sort of the terms are for each member, but have not heard or seen any communication about either reappointments or new appointments.
Mhm. It was brought up during the concept that the chair and vice chair positions, it's time for us to talk about, are we making changes, or is the committee making changes to those positions or not? And so Adrian had asked if there was a status update on the actual advisory committee positions. It's a good question.
I believe there are 5 positions between what's vacant and folks who are rolling off, if memory serves me correct. So we're talking about a sizable number, but still the general composition would remain, apologies for my dog, somewhat similar, I believe.
Yeah, I defer to the chair and the advisory board as a whole, but there's nothing that says you need to wait for new appointments or reappointments. And given that membership is rolling over time across administrations, I don't know if it's advisable to hold off on that decision as opposed to just making it as board, but of course defer to the chair and the wisdom of this board. So
I spoke to Jake Pollock about this a couple of weeks ago, and he didn't say with certainty, but it sounded like they wanted to sort of base these kinds of appointments on what comes out of the recommendations that are due in the middle of next month. So I don't know if they may have something by then, but it sounded like they were ready to sort of make their announcements all at one time in alignment with the recommendations that are coming from the transition committees. But I'm not speaking with any authority to say that. That's just what I gathered from a conversation that I had with them about this.
Do we want to form a nominations? I mean, forming a nominations committee is not a vote. So do we want to form a nominations committee at this juncture, or do we want to hold off and to even take that initial step? Because we do need to, I'm happy to continue to serve. I'm happy to step down and have somebody else take on the chairpersonship. But the term is a 1-year term that does expire if it's not renewed. With, again, that 2-year maximum term limit. And I'm not going to speak for Derek, and unfortunately Derek cannot speak for himself either, I believe, still, as to whether or not he's willing to continue to serve. But we may want to still consider a nominations committee to vet our options. So thoughts on that?
Isn't there an existing nominations committee?
It's not a standing committee. It was created for last year to get to these nominations. So we might want to consider whether or not it is a standing committee so that we're not recreating the wheel every year, since it is just a 1-year position, again, subject to renewal, but only 2 years at that. So I know Knowledge is not on. I don't know if Diamante has thoughts on whether or not she'd be willing to. It was the 2 of them, I believe, had co-chaired last year. I don't see either of them on the line. We can hold this item for our next meeting if no one's comfortable making a motion or recommendation as to how we should proceed on this. But I do believe that we are. But if we don't create a nominations committee until next month, then we're into May, and so we're kind of just drifting out of our terms as elected at that point. It's just as a point of note.
So we do maybe have an email follow up to the prior nominating committee after this meeting would be prudent to see if they just want to stay on, if they have any interest in staying on and continuing that role.
So I think we might have to first say that we want a nominations committee and then ask them if they want to stay in that position, because I don't think it's a given in the bylaws that it exists to do this function. And we say that we're going to have officers and that we're going to vote on them, but I don't think that our bylaws operationalize how we do that. Just kind of make it so versus how to make it so.
I see.
So that would perhaps be a two-step process where we could vote today to create a nominations committee and then discuss by email or some other fashion how to do that or make it contingent. There's a lot of different options for how to proceed if we choose to.
I'm happy to make that motion. I do want to hear Adrian's comment because I think we started talking at the same time.
I was just going to say the same thing, with 5 folks needing to be filling in our group and our dialogues and making sure that we have those representatives on the board. I think it's important that we do in a committee. I think it would be helpful probably, I think we're losing folks in the meeting as we're going a little bit longer. So I'm not sure that everyone who has participated in that process is here to make that commentary, but I do think we should be creating a nominating committee. I think it would also be helpful if we had a sense of that 5 number. What are the representation areas that those folks are now vacant, so that everybody can start to have some thinking around good options and actually folks to nominate before we're in a position where we're, showing up in a room together to make nominations.
So I'll make a motion that we form a nominating committee. Well, I'll stop there. I'll make a motion that we form a nominating committee.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And so the motion carries, and we will, I believe, reach out via email to go through some of the logistics in forming that nominating committee, and we'll be able to announce, should be able to announce who is going to be on that committee for April's meeting, and perhaps discuss a little bit about what the logistics look like for an upcoming election.
Well, and to Adrian's point, I would suggest that first meeting of that committee includes some information on what those expiring positions are.
I believe we have that.
What areas they fill.
Yes, which what's vacant. And perfect.
Sonia, we have that information available and can share that very easily.
I figured you did.
Okay. That concludes our administrative items for the day. Now we have our program expenditures and impacts by the URA.
Hi, I can briefly run us through these with Bettina's departure. This slide specifically shows our overall expenditures and dollar amounts by all of our programs. So the blue represents the amount that's been committed or closed, and the green is not yet committed per program. And this does not reflect the approvals that happened this month. That'll get updated for next month. These are the dollars committed and closed by AMI. So again, we have each program listed top to bottom, and then blue is the portion that's committed at or below 30% AMI, red at or below 50, green is that 60 to 80 category, and then purple is specific to just down payment, and that's people between 80 and 115% of the area median income. Or sorry, specifically down payment. I might have said 470. Sorry. If you want to go to the next slide, Becca. And then these are some dashboards with maps that they haven't been in the meetings for the last couple of months, but I did just want to show them again. And this one specifically for down payment and gives a few metrics on where we're at with that. But as of January 1st, so these will be updated for next month as well. Just with the staff change, we've had to kind of rework our data processing. And then this is a similar concept just for the homeowner assistance program and where it's being deployed throughout the city. And lastly, these are our development programs, so the rental gap and the for sale development program. And again, these numbers will be updated with the commitments that were made this month when we look at these again next month.
Thanks, Evan. Just two announcements. A calendar invite was sent out to the advisory committee extending these meetings throughout 2022. If you did not receive it, please email me and let me know, and I'll make sure that you have this on your calendar. And with that, our next advisory meeting is April 7th at 9 a.m. And we look forward to another robust conversation with you all.
Quick question, sorry, Shana or Evan, could you send out those data slides?
Yeah, of course.
So I could look at them a little bit more.
Always.
Sure.
Thank you.
If there are no further announcements, as Shana just said, our next advisory board meeting is April 7th at 9 a.m. Stay tuned for doodles on our pending committee meetings. And that concludes the March meeting of the Housing Opportunity Funds Advisory Board. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.